You know how there are those movies that maybe you've never seen, and whenever someone references the Catalina wine mixer, you just have to awkwardly say, haha, yeah, I've never seen Step Brothers. I mean, I know what you're talking about because it's just so deeply ingrained into our cultural consciousness, but no, I've never seen the hilarious 2008 romp starring Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly we've all come to know as Step Brothers. I don't know why I picked Step Brothers as a reference. I've definitely seen Step Brothers, so this video's off to a great start. Anyway, I've never seen Clueless. Well, by now I have, of course, because that's the point of this video. I've seen it at least twice by now, but until recently, Clueless was one of those movies that when it would come up, I would have to say I'd never seen it. And it's kind of weird that I hadn't. I mean, it's from 1995, it's written and directed by a woman, and perhaps most importantly of all, it was an early example of all those movies that came out for millennials as we were growing up, where it was like a hip and cool kid and a hip and cool school, but wait, it's actually classical literature. And I'm not talking about straight up and down adaptations like Romeo plus Juliet. I'm talking She's the Man or She's All That or Motocross. Okay, so most of them are Shakespeare, but not Clueless. Clueless is adapted from Emma by Jane Austen. But here's the thing. I'm not reading Emma. I'm not doing it. I watched some YouTube videos about it, don't worry, but I'm not reading 1,000 pages of 19th century English just to conclude that, yep, Clueless is an adaptation of that novel. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into Clueless. Now, normally I would start with a synopsis of the movie, but here's the problem. Synopsis is kind of just a fancy word for plot, and plot kind of implies that something happens in the movie. I took more than 5 full pages of notes during the movie, and it kind of reads like a 5-year-old trying to write a teen comedy because here's what happens in Clueless. There's this girl, Cher, and she's the prettiest and the smartest girl, and her daddy is the richest daddy, and they live in Hollywood, and she goes to school, and one day she gets a bad grade, but then she makes her teacher kiss a girl teacher, and then she gets a good grade. And then there's a new girl at the school, and Cher makes her more prettier, and then they get in a fight, and Cher almost dies in a car crash because she's bad at driving cars, and she goes to a party, and then she kisses a boy, but the boy is mean, and then she gets robbed, and then there's a new boy at school, and Cher likes him because he's smarter than all the other boys, but he doesn't like Cher because he likes boys, and then Cher falls in love with her brother, and they kiss, and they live happily ever after the end. Look, I just thought it'd be a funny bit, and honestly, I wrote the 5-year-old thing before I decided I was going to be drinking. When I say the story seems to flow like a 5-year-old telling you about their day, that's just an analogy. I don't mean it disparagingly. Like, you could say that works by Rothko or Pollock look like they could have been made by 5-year-olds, and now that I'm saying it out loud, I realize how condescending it sounds. So, allow me to summarize more charitably. Cher is the daughter of a wealthy attorney in Beverly Hills. She's not the best student, but she is a master manipulator. In order to improve her grades, she gently steers 2 of her teachers towards dating each other. And when she sees that they're happy, she decides to help more people. She adopts a new student with the goal of remaking her in Cher's own image. Then another new student comes to town, and Cher wants to date him, but then actually he's gay, so then they just end up being best friends. And then by the end, she gets together with her sort of stepbrother. Let me put it this way. Clueless lacks a central conflict. Our protagonist Cher wants to help people, I guess, but she kind of just lightly meddles in people's lives. And without a central conflict leading us in one direction, each scene just kind of lazily flows into the next one. Sometimes something happens that affects the flow, but we're never moving toward anything. Now, I'm not saying that stories can only have one conflict, or that the conflict has to be easy to pick out, or that it even needs a meaningful resolution. I think it's totally fine to play with the rules of storytelling, and that would make sense in some art house film or a slice of life indie movie. But what blows my mind is this is a 1995 $12 million Paramount Picture production for a teenage audience. And it's definitely not a typical high school rom-com. It kind of feels slice of life, but I don't even know if it's coherent enough for that. I mean, it's kind of a character study. In the beginning, Cher is selfless to everyone's detriment, and by the end she has become more self-centered and somehow a better person. Isn't that kind of backward though? What exactly is going on here? I've seen Clueless twice now, and I'm hoping I never have to watch it again because it is unironically one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. The entire time I was watching this movie, I felt nothing. Nothing for the characters, nothing for their lives, and worst of all, nothing for my own existence. Clueless is perhaps the greatest existential horror film of all time. So let's start with the obvious part. Nothing happens in this movie. Cher's life is perfectly fine. She has normal teenage problems, like she gets a C in debate and she falls for a gay guy. But other than that, she doesn't really have a conflict, like an A-plot type of conflict. Like, she does stuff. She convinces two single adults to start dating. She gives her friend a makeover. She goes to a party and fails to get her friend to hook up with her other friend. I'm running out of breath. It's the liquor. Considering she's a modern-day aristocrat, this is all very low stakes. Whatever power she has, she flexes very little of it, and so she has very little actual responsibility. And it's not like she gains more responsibility over the course of the movie. She just kind of makes some lateral social moves. She kind of grows up by the end, but not an unusual amount for a 15-year-old turning 16. Like, she's still naive enough to think that she can consent to a relationship with her 19-year-old stepbrother. So we don't even really get a coming-of-age story out of this. But meanwhile, all around her, there are real stories taking place. The teachers getting together, that's a movie right there. And Ty moving to a new school, getting a new look, and eventually ending up with her stoner Prince Charming, that's a movie. Even Dion and Murray have a far more interesting storyline, and they're the token black characters. Travis, the stoner Prince Charming who ends up with Ty, even he gets sober by the end. And while everyone grows up and comes of age and falls in love, Cher doesn't really get to have her own movie. How deeply tragic. The protagonist of the movie doesn't really affect the story in any material way. People just exist around her. She sticks her little fingers in the space-time surrounding them. Their lives barely ripple, and they move on through the universe. No matter what she does, Cher's entire existence is meaningless.
Everything I think and everything I do is wrong. I was wrong about Elton. I was wrong about Christian. Now Josh hated me. It all boiled down to one inevitable conclusion. I was just totally clueless.
And that's why I find this movie to be so tragic. But it's not a tragedy. All these terrible things happen over and over, and yet nothing changes. This stoner kid, he tries to kill himself after getting a bad grade. Dion almost gets herself, Murray, and Cher all killed in LA traffic. These guys try to murder Ty in broad daylight in the mall. Cher gets abandoned in front of a liquor store and then immediately mugged. And none of these terrible events matter. They don't progress the story. The characters don't learn anything. It's all just random. Sometimes you get hit by a tractor trailer. Sometimes you get shot for your wallet. None of this matters. Just like real life, it's all random and terrible, and you can just die at any moment for any reason whatsoever. But that's not it. It's not just terrible, tragic things that happen by accident. Everything is just chaos and nothing matters. When Travis gets the most tardies in debate class, the teacher steps aside so Travis can make an acceptance speech. And in the year 1995, Cher has a personal computer with a touchscreen CRT that uses machine learning to match outfits. And yeah, you could say this is satire, a lampoon of the excess of Beverly Hills in the mid-90s. But the movie doesn't always rely on the absurd for satire. It has realistic satire. Like this scene where Cher and Dion are talking on their phones in between classes and then they converge in the hallway. Like, oh, they're such teenage girls that they have to be talking to each other at all times, and also they have the wealth and privilege to have these cell phones. Satire. And that kind of satire makes sense within the rules of a high school comedy movie. But truly the rules of this movie are never settled. Kind of like how in real life, by the time you feel like you're finally starting to understand how life works, you're crushed by a teenage girl who's pushed off the third floor balcony of a shopping mall by just some random dudes. This movie is terrifying. So am I saying that this is one of those pieces of media where everybody's secretly dead, like Lost or The Others or Rugrats? I don't really think so. Like, I fully believe that these characters are living in hell, but that's no reason to believe that they're already dead. Because the moral of the story is you don't need to end up... Because the moral of the story is you don't need to die to end up in hell. Life is hell. The characters are constantly being thrown in harm's way, but they're never lucky enough to get the sweet embrace of death. And as you might expect from longtime residents of hell, these constant threats are played off as whimsical day-to-day annoyances.
The evening had turned into a royal mess. Sexually harassed, robbed.
But maybe I'm just reading into this, right? Like, it's not as if Amy Heckerling actually made the film in a way to suggest that life is constant pain, right? Actually, no. In a 97-minute movie, there are 3 establishing shots which unflinchingly center the pain of the characters. But not even the main characters, just the denizens of this hell world. Beverly Hells. Beverly Hells! And these are quick throwaway shots. A lesser director would have not put so much thought into these. But we can't show this world accurately unless we establish our shots in agony. Just look around and you'll see people in pain just everywhere. Now, okay, I've made it clear what I believe Amy Heckerling is trying to tell us with Clueless. But remember I mentioned earlier Clueless is based on Jane Austen's Emma? Is this what Emma was about? The meaningless torture that is everyday life? I can't imagine, right? Like, I haven't read it, and I'm not going to read it. But this seems dark for Jane Austen. So what's the difference? Well, in 1815, a teenage aristocrat dallying in the love lives of those around her, all while slowly learning to be more selfish. Maybe that's a charming story. I don't know. I didn't read it. But here's the thing about public school in Clinton-era Beverly Hills. Our aristocrat is going to be a lot closer to the peasantry. And like, she's aware of geopolitical conflicts.
Successes in central Bosnia.
You look confused.
Well, I thought they declared peace in the Middle East.
She hasn't earned the same naivete as a 15-year-old wealthy child in the English countryside might have. And so here we have the very vision of white American capitalist potential. But even with all the privilege afforded to her, Cher is totally powerless to the whims of the universe, geopolitics, romance, sex, life, death, not to mention the apparently chaotic free will of everyone around her. The only people she manages to get together are 2 fully grown teachers who end up getting married by the end of the movie. So we have to assume these adults had a fully fleshed out relationship off camera. Cher didn't do that. If we shifted our perspective to these 2 teachers, Cher's most impactful move in all of Clueless would be little more than a butterfly flapping its wings. And years from now, long after those 2 teachers are dead and gone, and long after Cher breaks up with her stepbrother boyfriend, her lungs are going to fail because Jenny McCarthy convinced her that vaccines cause autism, and her whole stupid life and this whole stupid movie will mean nothing, just like every single one of us. In Clueless, Cher has two best friends, Ty and Dion. Ty is played by the incomparable Brittany Murphy, who tragically passed away in 2009 from pneumonia, anemia, and an accidental overdose of over-the-counter and prescription medications, most likely taken to treat the symptoms of pneumonia. She was 32. Tragic, senseless, chaotic. Less than 6 months later, her widower was found dead in the same home with pneumonia and anemia. Turns out the house may have had toxic mold. Two people who had more money than I will ever see in my life, most likely killed by the reproductive process of a tiny, motionless organism. Dion is played by Stacey Dash, who is a Trump supporter who believes the trans rights movement has started to infringe upon her rights too much.
She's saying she wants to go into the women's bathroom. She's a woman now. Go into the women's bathroom. But why? It's a tyranny by the minority. Why do I have to suffer because you can't decide what you want to be that day?
I guess a lot of people in the transgender community would then say, it is who I am, and I don't choose to be one way or another. It's who I am.
Okay, then go to the bushes.
Whoever fights with monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster in the process. And when you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. And look at me, quoting Nietzsche. Even though he was a totally isolated, highly neurotic man who had to try hard to avoid thinking of himself as a complete failure. And I don't even know that. I'm just parroting what I learned from ContraPoints, because even knowledge is meaningless.
Woman, let me $5.
Murray, I have asked you repeatedly not to call me woman.
Excuse me, Miss Dion.
Thank you.
Okay, but street slang is an increasingly valid form of expression. Most of the feminine pronouns do have mocking, but not necessarily misogynistic undertone.
And I'm not even saying Brittany Murphy would have been any better than Stacey Dash. If she were alive today, statistically, she'd be much more likely to be a Trump supporter, but we'll never know because she just died. It's just like people die all the time for no good reason. Life is chaos. Death is chaos. Love and sex are chaos. This coffee cup is empty. Even asking these questions brings nothing but chaos because knowledge is chaos. Or is there even such a thing as knowledge? As in, can we ever truly know anything?
Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, but thy eternal summer shall not fade. Fat! Did you write that?
That's like a famous quote.
From where?
Cliff's Notes.
Oh.
Clueless, one of the most popular teen movies of all time, is a European art film about the futility of existence disguised as a summer blockbuster comedy. That's pretty wild. Hey everyone, thanks for watching this video. Obviously, I tried something new, getting drunk while I was doing it. Part of that is obviously because I'm talking about the meaninglessness of life. Let me know if that was entertaining. I don't know. As I'm speaking these words, I'm not even sure, how the past hour has gone. So, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Check me out on Instagram, Twitter, Patreon. And pass this around on Reddit, Facebook, Discord, wherever the mood strikes you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in a little bit.